Let's learn how to play Era Medieval Age. Era is a roll and build game for 2 to 4 players with a solo variant. We will not be covering the solo variant in this tutorial. For setup, organize the buildings by type. I have the buildings in one of the insert trays, organized by size, and different colors within the same compartment indicate different types of buildings. If you are playing with 2 players, you will need to remove one of each building type, as you can see I am doing now. This does not include any of the grey pieces, including the keep, walls, and scorched land. You will also need a number of these depleted tokens, as indicated by the player count. For a 3 to 4 player game, you will need all 5. For a 2 player game, you will only need 3. Each player will need a plastic board and a screen which can be folded to block your board or your dice. Each player will also need 6 coloured pegs. The blue one indicates your trade goods, the grey one to indicate your stone, the brown one to indicate your quantity of wood, and the yellow one to indicate your quantity of food. The white one indicates where you are on your culture track, and the orange one indicates where you are on your disaster track. Set them up at the quantities shown on screen. There is also a singular black peg. This will be given to the first player, and tracks which step you are on in the current turn. Each player will also need 1 keep, which is placed in the exact centre of the board, 6 spaces from each side. Three yellow longhouses, 3 walls of unit length 4, 1 farm, and a number of scorched earths depending on the amount of players. In a 2-player game, it is 2. In a 3-player game, it is 1, and in a 4-player game, it is 0. Secretly and behind your screens, each player will arrange their town however they see fit. This is done simultaneously and hidden from the other players. There are no restrictions to how you can build your town, except the scorched earth must be placed outside of walled-in areas. Each player will also need to receive dice corresponding to the buildings that they have received. Each player will also receive dice which correspond to the buildings they have received. Each player will also receive dice corresponding to the buildings in their settlement. 3 yellow dice for each of the longhouses, and 1 grey dice for the keep. Once all players have built their settlement, the screens can be lifted and the settlements revealed. Each player will roll their grey dice to determine the first player, who is the player who rolls the highest number of swords on the grey dice. The first player will receive the black peg and place it in the top of the turn order track, indicating the roll step. With everything set up, play is now ready to begin. Each player takes their turn simultaneously, and each turn is made up of 6 steps. The first step is the roll step. Behind their screens, in secret, each player will roll all of their dice. Anything with a skull has to be set aside. Optionally, you can set aside any number of other dice. You can then take a second roll. Again, anything with a skull has to be set aside, and you can remove any number of dice without a skull that you had previously set aside for your third and final roll. Once everybody has completed their rolls, the dice are revealed, and the turn proceeds. The second step is the collection step. Any resources showing on your dice will be added to your resources track. You can collect wood, stone, imported goods, and food. Some dice also include culture, which remove the white point marker. And some dice give you the choice between different resources. The third step is to feed your dice. Count the number of dice you have in your dice pool, and lower your food by that same amount. Any dice you cannot feed will count towards skulls, and move your disaster track down. The fourth step is to resolve your disaster, in which you count the skulls showing on your dice, and consult the table on the player aid, and execute the disaster. In this case I rolled 2 skulls, which is the clustered buildings, which loses you points if you have clustered buildings. As it stands, none of my buildings are touching each other, apart from the keep, which does not count towards clustered buildings. The fifth step is the building step. You can build as many times as you have hammers showing on your dice. In this case I have 1 hammer showing on my yellow dice. I spend 2 wood to build another longhouse. As an example of clustered buildings, that longhouse and farm are now clustered by touching each other orthogonally. Whenever you build a building, you gain the bonus applied to that building. In the case of a longhouse, I add a yellow dice to my pool. The sixth and final step is to resolve conflict between players. The grey dice has anything from 0 to 3 swords on it. If you rolled more swords than another player, and they did not roll shields on their grey dice to defend the attack, you can steal 1 resource from that player. If the player refuses to be extorted, they instead lose 1 point on their skull track. The black peg is passed to the next player, and their turns will continue in the same manner, everybody taking their turn simultaneously. The game will continue in this manner, with everybody taking their turns simultaneously, until inevitably a type of building has been fully taken from the supply. As soon as a type of building is lost from the supply, replace it with a depleted token. Do the same for the second set of buildings to be depleted, and the same for the third. In a 2-player game, once 3 depleted tokens have been played, the game ends. In a 3 or 4-player game, 5 depleted tokens have to be placed before the game ends. The game will end on that round. There will not be any final round. You will then need one of the score sheets available, and you can write the name of the players along the top of the sheet, and count the points along the side. Each of the buildings corresponds to a certain number of points, which, if they are surrounded by walls, will be doubled. There are bonus buildings, points for culture, points for walled-in area, and negative points for the number of skulls you have. The winner of the game is the person with the most points at the end of the game.